All right. Well, without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone again to today's webinar, Why America Gives 2020, how current events will affect philanthropy this giving season. My name is Cameron Ripley. I'm the CEO and founder here at Community Boost. And we are just so excited to bring you today's session in partnership with the Classy team. And we really hope it helps your organization just have the strongest year-end season possible to end the year strong, as well as tee you up with key insights for 2021 as well. Please know we are definitely allowing for plenty of Q&A in today's session specifically. We want our panelists to have as much time as possible to answer any questions you have. You know, I'm a big believer, and that's where some of the largest value for you all comes. So, again, my name is Cameron, CEO of Community Boost. We do digital marketing for nonprofits, and the Classy team has been a longtime partner of Community Boost, as in my opinion, they have built one of the best and strongest donation platform softwares in the world, and that serves the nonprofit space. And outside of amazing software, I'm always just such a big advocate and fan of all the amazing content, the events like the collaborative. But this specific piece, when I saw it, Why America Gives in this report, I just felt it was outstanding and was really grateful that the Classy team was willing to also hop on our platform and share with our specific audience their feedback and report as well. So I'm really excited to introduce you all to Krista Lamp and Elizabeth Pun from the Classy team. I'm going to let them really introduce themselves, but without further ado, let's go ahead and kick it off. I'll pass it to you, Liz and Krista.
Thanks so much, Cameron. We love our friends and partners here at Community Boost. Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Pun. I'm the manager of content here at Classy, and I've been with Classy for over 7 years now. Our team is responsible for all the content behind the Classy blog, our downloadable guides and resources, and many of our other efforts to just equip nonprofit professionals with the tools and resources that they need in order to do their jobs better. And we are just so excited to be here today. So thanks for having us.
Thanks, Liz, and thanks, Cameron, for that very generous introduction. My name is Krista Lamp, and I'm the Senior Manager of Communications and Brand here at Classy. I've been with Classy just about a year now, and our team was really integral in executing this year's Why America Gives survey and report, so I'm really excited to present you with some of our top findings today. Prior to coming to Classy, I was the Senior Director at Havas Formula, which is an award-winning national PR agency, where I drove most of the brand strategy and media engagement for a number of social enterprises, mostly in the CPG space. So just really happy to be here. Thanks for having both of us today, and looking forward to a great conversation.
Awesome.
So with that, Liz, I'll pass it back to you to kick it off.
Thanks, Krista. So we're actually going to take ourselves off camera now, just so that we can let our deck take center stage. But glad to have shown you our faces. So gonna... Awesome. Well, here I just wanted to give a quick overview of what we wanted to cover with you all today. We want to dive into first a little bit about the report, the history behind our report, what we wanted to achieve with our report, especially this year in 2020. And then we'll just go into some of the main sections from the report, how 2020 events will impact donor plans this giving season. Each section has a key data snapshot, which kind of includes a one or two, main key data points that we really found compelling from each section. We'll dive into that a little bit further, and then with each section, we'll also kind of present a thought starter as a takeaway from that, and how you might be able to reflect and apply kind of what we've found in that section. And then we will save time at the end for some Q&A. So digging into why we created this report and how our 2020 edition differs from our past reports. So this year was our third annual Why America Gives report, and it launched on November 19th. We had sent out a survey to Americans who are 18 years old and older in order to uncover insights into how and why donors plan to give between Giving Tuesday and November 31st. Our report typically dives into data trends that inform fundraising strategies so that they can maximize their fundraising potential for peak giving season. With 2020, this year was a bit different. So those of you who obviously profits, you've all been impacted by just the collective anxiety and passion really driven by this year's events. So, whether you've seen explosive growth as a result of a more concerned and engaged society, or, you've seen donations slow as everyone's attention is focused elsewhere, every single organization has had to overcome enormous challenges this year. So as we thought through our report, we wanted to dig in and explore the insights that would be most helpful as nonprofits plan for and execute their year-end fundraising. And most importantly, we pose the questions: how have the events of this year specifically affected donor behavior? Will supporters be giving more or less than last year with everything going on? And have COVID-19 and the social justice movement changed the causes or organizations that donors will give to? So based on the results of our survey, we are optimistic about what the giving season is bringing. Frankly, we're right in the middle of it. So let's dive right in. In our report, we uncover 5 main ways that 2020 events have impacted donors' plans for this giving season. How COVID-19 is fueling giving, how the fight for social justice is motivating donors this year, the role that politics is playing a role in giving, and how supporters are giving digitally and how they're engaging in virtual events. This was a big point for us, and it's really no surprise given just the amount of in-person events that have had to be canceled or pivoted this year with us going virtual. And finally, how and the fact that donors ultimately still plan to give this holiday season. So let's start with the first section: how COVID-19 will affect giving this year. So if we jump to our key data snapshot slide, here's a quick snapshot from the findings of our report that highlight how COVID-19 is affecting charitable giving plans. Nearly 3 in 5 Americans say that the pandemic has affected their charitable giving this year. And almost a quarter of respondents say that the pandemic has actually caused them to give more this year in comparison to last year. In the following slides, we'll dig into why their expected giving levels have changed and which generations of donors are more likely to give more this year than 2019 because of COVID-19. So we know that 3 in 5 Americans say that the COVID-19 pandemic has affected their charitable giving this year, but exactly why have their plans changed? You'll see that we just listed them all out here on the slide because I feel like each of these is just really interesting. And we found that, Americans are giving differently this year for a number of reasons. Notably, the majority believe that nonprofits need more now than they did before the pandemic. And this drive and willingness to meet the needs of nonprofit organizations was also reflected in the trends that we saw here on the Classy platform. Classy actually supported a spike in platform donation volume from April through June that was actually triple the steady growth rate that we've been experiencing from the beginning of the year. Other reasons also include that people's incomes have changed. Americans are more passionate about issues now than they were before the pandemic. People just frankly have more time to look into new organizations, and people are also using their stimulus checks to donate to causes that they care about. So, many nonprofits might be wondering if support for the pandemic is going to replace what Americans would normally give to nonprofit organizations. And the good news is that 27% have made contributions to COVID-19 relief on top of their typical nonprofit support, while about 24% of respondents said that their COVID-19 donations replaced what they would typically support. So To sum it all up, while there are a wide range of reasons that affect Americans' giving behaviors due to the pandemic, there's a clear opportunity for organizations to understand that supporters are wanting and willing to continue to support worthy causes, and there's an opportunity to continue engaging them to maximize your fundraising potential this giving season. So now let's take a peek into which generational cohort is more likely to give more because of COVID-19. So our survey results found that Gen X, born between 1965 and 1976, are the most likely to support COVID-19 relief efforts, followed closely by Gen Z, our youngest generation, born between 96 and 2015. Millennials, born between 1977 and 1995, are also, a noteworthy generational group that plans to give to pandemic relief efforts. So knowing this, whether your nonprofit is directly related to COVID-19 relief, or you're simply just trying to continue advancing your worthy cause during this time, it's important to tailor your messaging to these different cohorts of supporters in order to have a positive impact on your success this year. Which specific causes are donors most likely to give to this year? Looking at the results, we weren't really that surprised. Though disaster relief has historically ranked as the #1 cause that Americans supported in our 2018 and 2019 reports, COVID-19 has, as usual, shaken things up and has brought health causes to the top of the list this year. Even though we actually fielded this survey, during the time when wildfires were taking over California, Oregon, and Washington, health causes still outranked disaster relief, the environment, and education as the cause to which Americans are most likely to give. It is worth calling out that this is the first year in our 3 years that education has actually made the top of the list as well, or the top 3, I mean. And the call out here is that regardless of your cause, emphasize how your organization might be directly or indirectly solving for challenges that have arisen from the COVID-19 pandemic. So again, that brings us to our thought starter for the section, which is, we know that donors are giving more this year because of the pandemic. How are you highlighting how your efforts specifically are directly or indirectly alleviating the challenges presented by COVID-19? Many organizations up to this point this year have worked tirelessly to pivot their messaging, to hopefully showcase just how their work is solving for the different pain points from all different points of society that have arisen in 2020. And there's going to be a continued need to do so, just given the fact that we're still in the throes of this pandemic. And so with that, I'll pass it over to Krista to walk us through our next section, which is all about how the social justice movement is motivating donors this year.
Thanks so much, Liz. I really love that cause category data. But as we all know, COVID-19 wasn't the only pandemic that played a role in giving this year. Systematic racism and the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement really dominated our news cycle. And this is a clear example of how current events are playing a role in giving behaviors among donors. So in that same vein, let's explore how the fight for social justice influenced donor plans this year. So here are a couple of key points that really stood out to us when we asked how the social justice movement had impacted donor plans. Nearly 1 in 5 survey respondents said that the recent social injustices had the most impact on their charitable giving in 2020. And 42% of Americans say they definitely or probably have or will donate to an organization that is working to fight against these injustices this year. So let's take a deeper look into why these data points are so significant. So here's the breakdown of the percentage of Americans who have donated or plan to donate to an organization that's working to fight against social injustice. Like we already said, a whopping 42%, almost half of Americans said they'll definitely or probably donate, with 23% claiming they might or might not donate. So this is really notable because of those who have donated or plan to donate to social justice causes, 43% said this donation would be in addition to contributions they'd be making to other causes, really showing the willingness of supporters to give more when a cause is related to a significant current event. So how does the recent social injustices impact donor behavior this giving season? Based on our survey results, social injustices have the third highest impact on charitable giving in 2020. It was only below the COVID-19 pandemic and the current political climate. And notably, more than half of Americans say that 2020 was their first year they've ever donated to this type of cause. So this really indicates that nonprofits who are fundraising for causes in this sector will likely see, or most likely have already seen, a significant bump in donations and new donors this giving season. So now that we know how much the social justice movement has affected charitable giving this year, we wanted to take a look into who is most likely to donate to give to these organizations working against social injustices. So like the COVID-19 relief efforts, Gen X are also the most likely to support organizations working against social injustice. Gen Z and millennials followed closely behind. And from our survey results, while Gen X still leads the charge, younger generations appear to be more passionate about donating to organizations whose mission align closely with timely events like COVID-19 and the social justice movement. So this is really no surprise, given that younger generations are the most tech-savvy generation, and they're also astutely aware of the current events and socioeconomic climates, and they really want to get involved with causes they're most passionate about. So that brings us to our thought starter for this section. And it's really about repeat or recurring donations from your new supporters. So, while many social justice and COVID-19 pandemic related organizations are not only seeing incoming donations from existing donors, they're also seeing an influx of new donors. And so even organizations who aren't directly related to these two causes most likely saw an influx of donors on this past Giving Tuesday. I'm sure many of you all on this call did. So the key takeaway here is that you'll want to steward these new supporters and turn them into recurring donors to really support your organization long-term and consistently throughout the year. So with that, I will turn it back over to my colleague Liz, who will talk through our politics section.
Thanks, Krista. I totally agree with you that younger generations are obviously really in tune with current events, and they'll continue to play a significant role in this year's giving season and frankly just beyond. So the next topic we wanted to cover is politics. This is an important topic still to discuss because of its potential impact on charitable giving this year. Presidential election years have historically impacted giving, and this year is no different. Between the primary and general elections, politically driven donations actually hit new records this year. And over the past several years, political giving has only continued to trend upward. So let's take a peek at our key data snapshot for this section to just uncover how politics play a role on whether Americans are planning to give more this year and how the outcome of the elections might affect which organizations that donors support. So like I mentioned, part of why we want to explore this area is that in 2016, nonprofits in many cause categories actually witnessed a big bump in charitable donations following the November presidential election, which has often been referred to as the Trump bump. In this survey, which again we fielded ahead of the 2020 election, more than a third, 37% of Americans said that they would donate to organizations that support their political beliefs if their preferred candidate lost. For those Americans who are donating to political causes, they planned to increase the amount of their giving compared to the previous year. this really just aligns with the news that this was a record-breaking year in terms of politically driven donations. And only 7% of respondents said that they would give less this year. Our survey revealed that Americans support organizations that align closely with their political beliefs, especially if their preferred candidate loses. So, especially making charitable donations to counterbalance a political loss was actually more popular among Republicans than Democrats. And lastly, Democrats stated that they are slightly more likely than Republicans to say that COVID-19 affected their charitable giving plans this year. Which brings us to our thought starter for this section, which is, if your organization is tied to a politically driven cause, are you prepared for this potential influx of new donors? The entire sector should keep a close eye on the impact that new politicians or measures might have on, beginning from local, state to federal laws. These changes could result in both new and recurring donors for organizations with a direct tie to politically driven causes. So with that, I'm going to pass it over back to Krista to speak to our next section, which dives into how Americans prefer to give this year and beyond, and whether virtual events are here to stay.
Thanks, Liz. I'm really personally excited to dive into the data for this section. I think probably many of you on this call have been asking yourselves, how donors are giving in this pandemic world, and whether or not virtual fundraising events are a great way to engage with your donors while many of us are forced to stay home. And, even before COVID-19 forced many Americans to work and socialize from home, donors were already increasingly choosing to engage with and donate to nonprofits online. And the pandemic, as we've all seen, has really accelerated this trend. Separately, we wanted to dive into how supporters were reacting to a nonprofit's pivot to virtual fundraising events when many were forced to cancel 5Ks, galas, and other in-person fundraising events that are often major drivers of donations for organizations. So let's go to the next slide and dive right in. So for this section's key data snapshot, we're highlighting some of the top preferred channels for giving, which were a website on a computer and through an app or mobile site on a smartphone or tablet. And then in regards to virtual events, it was really exciting to see that nearly 1/3 of US consumers say they had supported or participated in a virtual charity event since the COVID-19 pandemic began, which we really think is significant, since we're only really looking at the past handful of months. So it's great to see the willingness to participate there. So we asked survey participants how they prefer to give to nonprofits in the future, and this answer really wasn't surprising to us. The majority of Americans say that they prefer to make digital or remote donations, while about 30% still prefer in-person donations. So the key takeaway here is to really make sure you're meeting your supporters where they are and giving them an easy way to make a digital donation. We really feel like if there's one thing that your organization should prioritize this giving season, it's this. I can speak from past experience. I've abandoned fundraising pages that provide an inconsistent, clunky, or outdated user experience when trying to give digitally or via mobile. And, oftentimes donors correlate this online giving experience with trust and credibility for your organization. So if your online giving experience isn't top notch, you're likely leaving a negative impression on a potential supporter and therefore missing out on possible donations. And not just that donation in that moment, but the potential for this donor to return and give more to your organization. And then, in terms of online giving versus direct mail, I definitely choose the former. So, the moral of this story is really make sure that your organization has a seamless online giving experience. So here's a quick snapshot of how generational donors prefer to give. No surprise here that younger generations make up the largest portion of those who prefer to give digitally. Gen Z, millennials, and Gen X generations all stated that they prefer giving via an app or mobile site on their smartphone. Baby boomers selected a website on a computer as their top channel, so they're still not necessarily wanting to give in person. And the silent generation preferred mail-in donations. So the key takeaway here is that the online and digital giving is really the way of the future. On Classy, we personally see 60% of the traffic to campaigns coming from a mobile device. And of that traffic, 50% come from social media. So as you're thinking through your fundraising strategy for next year and even this year for end of year giving season, don't overlook the importance of a mobile responsive campaign and ensuring your campaigns not only look great on a computer, but are mobily optimized as well. So again, our key takeaway for this section is really about providing that seamless mobile and online giving experience to capture supporters across generations. We've outlined that it's more important than ever to make sure supporters can give online, including on mobile. Clearly both young and older generations are looking to give digitally, and we think this trend will only continue to increase year over year. So if you haven't implemented or streamlined your online giving process, you could be losing out on valuable support during this critical giving season. So now I want to hop in to virtual events. And, we've really heard a lot about the pivot to virtual fundraising events. It's no surprise that these types of events have gained momentum when many of us are under stay-at-home orders and, large gatherings still aren't allowed. So as nonprofits scramble, I'm sure many of you on this call have had to scramble this year to pivot to virtual fundraising events. So many were uncertain of how it would be received by their supporters. The great news is that according to our data, 30% of people said they've participated in a virtual event since the pandemic hit. And I think this stat is even more exciting. Of that, more than half raised or donated more than they did in an in-person setting. So why do we think that happened? We think it's more than likely because more people can participate in your event if it's conducted virtually rather than in person. So, we personally saw this play out for Classy's annual conference, the Collaborative. We made the decision for our conference back in June to cancel our in-person event that usually takes place on the East Coast in Boston and pivot to a virtual conference for the first time ever. And, we were really uncertain of what the turnout would be like and how people would respond to a virtual setting. So we decided to make the event free. We knew that it was so vital for nonprofits to have that collaboration with each other during that time. And we really saw registrations skyrocket compared to previous years. So, nonprofits should really consider incorporating a virtual component when planning out events for next year and beyond. We're looking at 2020 and 2021 where we might not be allowed to have large gatherings, but even beyond that, we think incorporating a virtual component can really help you dissolve geographic borders and engage more donors. So, while we all might assume that Gen Z and millennials were the target audience for these types of digitally focused activities, because these generations tend to be more tech savvy, the data actually showed us that almost half of Gen X respondents participated in a virtual fundraising event during COVID-19. So the generational divide in participation illustrates the importance of engaging older audiences and not just those generations perceived as the most tech savvy. The data also showed that most Americans have a positive view of virtual fundraising events. Overall, most respondents had this positive view of virtual charity events, with more than a third saying these events are a safe alternative to in-person gatherings, and a quarter saying virtual events make donating, fundraising, or participating easier. So, with that said, nearly a quarter of respondents disagreed, stating that they felt less connected to a cause when donating, fundraising, and or participating in a virtual event. So this really means that nonprofits have to continue to think of innovative and creative ways to engage donors through online channels. And here at Classy, so many of our customers we've really seen step up and come up with so many great innovative events. And there really are a variety of creative ways you can engage donors through a virtual event. A few are, if you look to throw an annual gala every year, you can emulate table fundraising with peer-to-peer fundraising and team captains. You might actually end up netting a higher fundraising total with the expanded attendance and less overhead cost. Another great way to engage supporters is to throw a cooking or mixology class online. So whether you're making homemade pasta or mixing up a nice old fashioned, cooking and mixology classes cater perfectly to this virtual audience. It's also a great opportunity for nonprofits to partner with a local chef or mixologist. We're based here in California, and right now all of our restaurants are closed again. It's takeout only, and local restaurants are looking for ways to continue to reach their audiences and keep their businesses surviving. So this gives us a really good opportunity to reach out to these businesses in our local community and stream a virtual fundraising event live with them. You can charge admission with a ticketed events page, or in the form of a donation, and you can set tiers for gifts, making calls to donate to your nonprofit through the live stream. Another great opportunity is to partner with a local fitness studio. Same thing. Many of them are closed right now in different parts of the country, and doing something like live streaming a relaxing yoga class could allow you to tap into a local yoga studio, invite them to lead a class or a series of classes in partnership with your nonprofit. From there, you can sell tickets to your community as well as the community that regularly supports the yoga studio. So you're exposing your nonprofit to new audiences. And really the best part of this virtual fundraising idea is that there's no limit to the number of people who can join. You can truly expand your reach in that way. And so, as you can see, this is just an opportunity for all of us to get creative, and there's really no limit on how creative we can get with our virtual fundraising events. They're likely here to stay, and even having a mix of in-person and virtual fundraising events in years to come could prove fruitful and strike the right balance between in-person and being online. We know Zoom fatigue is real. You guys are all sitting on a Zoom call listening to us talk right now, and I'm sure it's super easy to tune out. So ensuring you're meeting the needs and likes of all of your donors and having a mix of virtual and in-person when it's safe to do so is key. So, we've said it before, but even as your organization starts to plan for 2021 and beyond, the data really shows that virtual events are here to stay. Removing physical barriers allows you to tap into more supporters, and we encourage everyone to have an online component to your fundraising events, even when large gatherings are allowed once again. So with that, I will pass it off to Liz to go through our final section on how donors still plan to give this holiday season.
Thanks, Krista. Diving in here with everything going on in 2020 and the economy in the place that it is and maybe in the future, it's natural to think that Americans' giving behavior this year could negatively impact nonprofits' abilities to fundraise. So we are happy to see that the data from our report indicates the opposite. The majority of Americans plan to give the same amount or more than they did in 2019, which is so exciting to see. Though many Americans have been impacted financially, like as we covered by COVID-19, survey respondents still feel compelled to give this year if they can. Many nonprofits have been hesitant to fundraise this year due to donor fatigue. And, with these results, we're really indicating that you really shouldn't worry about that. Instead, you can enter the giving season, continue the giving season with a plan to really engage your supporters and have the confidence that you'll still see positive results. I really like to take Giving Tuesday from just a few days ago, for example. Even after such a challenging year and people were just really curious how Giving Tuesday was going to turn out, nonprofits raised a total of almost $2.5 billion on Giving Tuesday 2020, which is a 25% increase from Giving Tuesday 2019 as a whole. And we were just so thrilled on the Classy platform specifically because at Classy, our nonprofit community raised over $37 million collectively, which is a 95% increase from our 2019 results. I mean, just incredible. And the average gift size also increased on our platform that day from $112 to $130. So donors are wanting to give, and they're wanting to give more. So if we take Giving Tuesday as a sign, donors are actively looking to give back, especially in 2020. So we love to end our presentation there, and we'll turn it over to Cameron for some Q&A.
Excellent. Well, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Liz and Krista. I have so many thoughts and so many notes, but we also have a fair amount of questions. But yeah, thank you. Well, we'll kick it off with, I'll just moderate these questions. And if you have more questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A and or chat, and we'll try and get to them as much as we can. We definitely have some time here. So first up, let's see, there was a question about, was there a question in the survey about giving less than last year?
Yeah, Cameron, I can take that one. Yes, there wasn't a specific question about giving less, but we asked respondents how their giving has changed, including whether or not they're giving more, the same, or less compared to this year. So the good news is that 3 and 5 said they were actually giving more, meaning that the remaining respondents said that they were giving less or the same as last year. And if you want to dive into that data more, you can actually go and download the full report where we break out all of the questions and you're able to see who's giving more, less, and the same.
Excellent. As folks are at home, how do you think a direct mail campaign would fare based on the data, especially if there was a QR code for a digital giving opportunity?
Yeah, I can take that one. I think that's a really good question. If you do a direct mail strategy or tactic, I would just really make sure to combine it in an overall cohesive offline and online strategy. Make sure to marry that with an online strategy. I think a QR code is a great idea, or maybe even in your direct mail, you can include a custom link, directing people to head over to your website or a specific donation page, and it could help you track which donations are coming from your offline efforts versus online. But our main takeaway would be to make sure that you don't leave online out of the equation. The data from the survey has shown that giving via website, giving via mobile device or an app is frankly just the top preferred methods for donors. So, make sure, and this is really to capture support across generations too. It's not just the younger generations. So just make sure that it would be part of an overall offline and online cohesive strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when direct mail is done right, it can definitely work when it's targeted well. But what is interesting, when I think about the pandemic and its effect on tech, I think it's also accelerating a lot of change that was inevitable, right? Like we've all felt this work from home, vibe, right? A lot of our team actually misses the office to some degree, but working from home will forever be a part of our model. Fully remote team members will always be there. And, that's just one example. And I think with direct mail, with people being at home, there's an opportunity to do it well. I like how you're thinking about that QR tracking, but also, I think there's a lot of companies that have always invested a lot in print media. And then all of a sudden they cut their print media budget and their sales are still the same. And so, I think they're going to start to question certain channels to some degree and or reprioritize budget. So
yeah, that's a good point.
Just kind of tease up for virtual events. So there's a question here, reply virtual events. Does the data share any insights regarding pricing versus in-person events? Free doesn't scale, giving a pay what you can option, et cetera.
Perfect, thanks Cameron. I can take that one too. There wasn't any data or questions asked specifically about pricing for virtual events, but this is a really great question as you're thinking about your events for, 2021. while my thoughts would be that while free doesn't necessarily scale, it does multiply people's ability and your ability to bring in new donors into your organization. That barrier is lifted, right, for participants to be able to hear about your organization and just easily participate. And so I can't say for sure based on data, what is like the best pricing model for you to go with, but I will say that free does open the gateway for people to enter your organization, to acquire new donors whom you can then steward beyond that. So I also think that you can ask for any donation that they can make. And another good thought with this would be, experiment with implementing peer-to-peer into your event strategy as well. One of the cool creative things that we saw with one of our customers, Upaya, is that they had to pivot their gala like in a matter of days, a week, to virtual when the pandemic hit. And they actually had, for their in-person event, they were planning to have, table captains that would fundraise from their table. And they actually just brought that over to online, and they made their table captains into just peer-to-peer team captains who were then able to solicit their entire social network for donations for the event. So, which clearly, they were able to just actually raise more than they were able to in previous years. So I think peer-to-peer is also a great way to kind of multiply and exponentially what you might be able to bring into your event, in addition to what you might be considering for actually ticket pricing as well.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and if anything, experiment with a potential freemium. That's what we're coaching a lot of our clients on, is it can start free, but then there can be value adds for investing more or donating even in advance. Next up is, it's so great to see that donors are giving more to important causes in the health and social injustice spaces, but my org doesn't have to do with those topics. Should I still make an appeal to donors at your end?
Yeah, I can take this one. This is the question I think that we've been hearing a lot. Like, so what? My organization isn't health related. It's not directly responding to COVID-19 relief. We're not a social justice organization. Should I still be fundraising? And the short answer to that is yes. Your mission isn't less important because of the current events of this year. You still have a job to do. You still have people that depend on your nonprofit. And so if you're not fundraising, then you're missing an opportunity. It's really, I think, an opportunity to remind your supporters of your mission and how critical their support is for your work that you're doing. You can also share more about how the pandemic's affected and had a direct impact on your organization and those that you serve. So, be honest with your supporters. We've seen nonprofits make appeals that say, we're struggling, quite frankly, and like, we need the support of all you to keep our critical mission moving forward. So I think that level of transparency is really resonating with people right now. And, focus, really hone in on that impact that you're making to those that you serve. Your mission, like I said, doesn't stop because of the pandemic. So just keep at it.
Excellent. With this success and interest around virtual fundraising events, what would be a best practice or tip you can give on how to be successful thinking of 2021 events?
I love this question. I'll take this. So one of the things that we've actually seen some of our customers be successful in pivoting to virtual events is actually to potentially make their campaigns longer. So for example, one of our customers, Hope for Haiti, they typically have this weekend long hike called Hike for Haiti. When they had to pivot to virtual this year, they actually extended it from just a weekend into an entire month. And they were actually able to 10x the results from their 2019 campaign. And I think that, in addition to a number of other, heavy marketing tactics, this longer campaign was actually able to give them more runway to get people to hear about the event, participate virtually, especially since, people can take their walks whenever they can throughout the month and still be able to participate and add to that fundraising goal. So that was one of the tactics that they saw was really helpful in in raising more for that event. Another customer, Mary's List, they ran also a campaign for World Refugee Day, which was June 20th, I believe. And they actually made this into a month-long campaign. So they launched on June 1st. The peak was June 20th for World Refugee Day, where they had like this virtual event where they live streamed it. They planned a whole itinerary. And so for this campaign, what they did was they typically have this campaign around food, since that's such a really big part of their mission. And to make it virtual, they actually decided to have one of their program graduates, who's also a chef, make these Syrian picnic lunchboxes, which people could purchase and pick up for curbside delivery or pick up in advance of the June 20th World Refugee Day. So they were able to do that creatively. People got their lunches June 20th. They all, joined online where you could still donate. There was a time when everyone could like open their meals and still share it with each other. And then actually they live streamed that event. They took clips from that event, turned it into a short recap video, and then they promoted that video from June 20th to June 30th. So they were still able to kind of have that that continued runway to market their event for people who didn't know about the event and now could still donate to the campaign, or they did participate in the event, but now they were just so excited by seeing the recap video again and want to donate more. And donations were actually still coming in even past June 30th cutoff. So I do think that extending it into a longer time frame than you might normally would for an in-person event could just give you more of that time, that runway, in order to help you build that momentum and give your community more time to take action.
Those are definitely some impressive wins and case studies. Thanks for sharing. I think one other add there for virtual fundraising in the new year is even in Q2, Q3, when live events come back, I feel like people will hopefully be drawn to them and there'll be that excitement. But also I think having a virtual component, even for future live events, will just forever be, it's again, one of those things that the pandemic has simply accelerated. Like that will always exist, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really just like allows your events to scale at this point. It's rather than kind of taking that option away. I feel like I totally agree with you, Cameron. It's just kind of added this factor to continue to like scale your event model in the future.
Excellent. Well, here's a quick one. What was the sample size again of the survey? How were participants selected?
Yep, we surveyed 1,000 Americans 18 years or older, and they were selected at random. We used a third-party survey company that we commissioned for the survey, so respondents were selected at random out of that larger pool.
Excellent. Do you have any resources or insights on where to go to learn more about how to host an effective virtual event, specifically on the tech side of things?
I love this question, given that at Classy we know that this is just an important topic that our community is just so wondering about. So if you head over to our blog, we have several blog posts all about virtual event best practices, ideas, examples from some of the creative campaigns that our customers have been able to create this past year. We also created a specific virtual events toolkit, which is a downloadable resource that kind of also is a kind of compilation of many of those things, ideas for campaigns, best practices, how you can also use your fundraising software to just maximize your virtual event, as well as some ideas from our customers too. So I would really encourage you to head over to our Classy blog and check out those resources.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add to that on the tech side of things, since that was of particular interest, after we pivoted our own conference, the collaborative, to be virtual this past June, our videographer and producer actually wrote an entire blog post on how we did that from a technology standpoint, what types of tools he recommends using. And he was able to do this on a budget, if you will. So he includes tips and tricks for things that are really affordable that pretty much any nonprofit can execute on. So that's over at classy.org/blog.
Thanks, Krista. Actually, that reminds me of another blog post that our events team also wrote, a very extensive kind of deep dive into how we pivoted, our team pivoted from our in-person conference to a virtual conference. Clearly, it's a for-profit conference, so it's a little bit different, but there's a lot of insights in there as well to consider as you kind of just pivot to a virtual event too. So thanks for bringing those up.
Yeah, those are great events. I definitely personally read those blog posts as we launched our home summit last year as well. They're really helpful. I highly recommend them. And then on the topic of virtual fundraising events, just a quick add is really on the marketing side, when it comes to scaling and marketing those events to new audiences, I think what has been most successful for our 160 plus customers that we directly support has been a lot of Facebook and Instagram advertising. That's just been one of the channels that we've been able to effectively, drive revenue for those for the majority. All right, next here, we got a few more questions and we'll wrap up. What do these findings mean for the future of fundraising beyond this immediate giving season?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, Cameron. I feel like you said that, but I mean, virtual, I think is going to be with us for a long time, even when in-person events can return. I think nonprofits will really be successful if they continue to have some sort of online component. We saw this pre-pandemic, the Hope for Haiti example that Liz touched on earlier, that has actually always been a virtual event. They made some tweaks this year, made it longer, and like she said, 10x that event. But I think being able to get rid of those geographical boundaries, because you always have an online component, will just help expose your organization to more people. So whether that means hosting your 5K in person and then allowing people across the country to participate virtually, or utilizing some sort of streaming service to reach more audiences, we truly feel like virtual, the possibilities are endless and it's here to stay. People are a lot more comfortable in a virtual capacity because of the past few months and the pandemic. I think one other thing that we've really seen, and that will stay with us long after life returns to normal, whatever that is, we've seen the importance of recurring donations. So this year, really recurring donations kept organizations going in the face of adversity. And so this just put an extra emphasis on the fact that we should be stewarding one-time donors into recurring to really have that longevity and that steady income coming in for an organization. And so, if you've brought on a lot of new donors because it was crisis donors or something similar, make sure that you're giving recurring a focus and stewarding them into lifetime supporters.
Excellent. Well, I want to make sure you guys have a few minutes to wrap. So last question here. Thoughts on overextending your reach versus online events? Having it be open to as many people across the world is great, but have you seen any negative repercussions of that?
We haven't, and Liz, you can feel free to weigh in if you've seen anything. I feel like all of the customers that we've been lucky enough to highlight here today and beyond have really seen a lot of success with virtual and removing those geographic limitations. We know that donor acquisition, especially new donor acquisition, is always so important for nonprofits. And so being able to really tap into people across regions is great. I think the one call out I would make is to just ensure that if you are looking at people worldwide, making sure you can receive donations in various currencies, that could definitely be a barrier to entry for some people, something to keep in mind. But for the most part, our customers have seen a lot of great success with virtual events.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much. Any, last thoughts, words, recommendations, things to visit?
For myself, no, this was just a lot of fun. Thank you all for joining and asking those awesome questions and listening to the data that we were able to share. We are really excited about what we found. And on our side of things, we're going to continue to keep an eye on how the landscape is going to continue to evolve into the future and continue to, like this Why America Gives report and our content on our blog, and just continue and for forward thinking other content that we would create. We're just really excited to continue to help equip nonprofit professionals with the tools that they need to continue adapting and overcoming. So thank you all for joining today.
Yeah. Same. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. This was a report that I was really excited personally to put out because I was so curious on how donors were changing their behaviors based on this unprecedented year. And I think I'll just leave everybody with, we know it was a tough year. We know everybody changed. Everything changed for us. And so here's to 2021 and beyond. And what the data showed us is things aren't as grim as maybe we thought. People are opening up their wallets and they're giving more to causes that they care about. So thank you all for the important work that you do. And, we're just very optimistic about where the industry is going.
Yeah, and thank you, Cameron and Community Boost team, for inviting us and having us here today. We're really excited.
Well, I love that, Krista, too. And just, I think that's one of what has made me just so grateful to be a part of the nonprofit ecosystem and grateful for those that can step up and support. And this data was amazing. Jeremiah will definitely be sending, and to everyone, we'll be sending out this deck, this recording, as well as a link so you can download the full Why America Gives report. And I highly recommend you check it out. And I think it'll, share it with your board, and it'll help further empower your organizations to, again, end the year strong and have a successful 2021. So thank you both, Liz, Krista. This has been amazing. Really appreciate you all hopping on and talking with our audience today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.